Well, welcome to the first ever Calvary Conversations. My name is Sean LePage, and I'm the chairman of the Ministry Studies Department at Calvary University, and I'm also serving in an administrative role, working with marketing and communications here at Calvary University in Kansas City, Missouri. Signed in with me today are three of my fellow Calvary faculty and men I presume to call my friends. I'm glad you've all joined me today, gentlemen. In alphabetical order, I want to introduce you. Dr. Mike Dodds is the director of the Calvary University Press, and he's a professor of ministry studies here at Calvary. And then Mr. Tim Hange is the TESOL coordinator, and I admit I had to look up to remember exactly what TESOL stands for. It's Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages. He's our coordinator here at Calvary for that, and he's an assistant professor of English and communications. And then Mr. Joshua Paxton, the director of Burnham Center for Global Engagement, and he's also an associate professor of intercultural studies in the Ministry Studies Department with myself. So welcome, gentlemen. I'm excited to be embarking on this new endeavor with you.
Yeah,
well, today, good. Well, today we will be discussing this new venture. That's our conversation today. We decided together to call it Calvary Conversations, and we're going to talk about that and just the need for this. We feel that there's a need for this kind of a tool, and we want to talk about our goals and maybe even our hopes and dreams for this conversation. So like I said, the four of us were recently planning together and developed this idea, but we were planning the annual Christian Leaders Conference at Calvary and decided that while we're still under the dark cloud of COVID-19, we would try a different approach this year and moving forward. Not that we're not going to have the Christian Leaders Conference in future years, but this year we decided to move forward with this online conversation and call it Calvary Conversations. And so, the basic idea here is that we just believe that there are so many important conversations happening in our world, in our culture today, and there are so many ways to have conversations. It's almost like white noise, but I'm reminded of that great little just a single verse about these guys called the sons of Issachar in 1 Chronicles 12:32 that says that they understood the times and they knew what Israel should do. And so I just believe that this is a great idea. It's a great concept for us to embrace because we need to work together and think together and initiate conversations with each other and with the people around us so that we can understand the times and discover and learn and know for ourselves what the church should do. And so that's kind of the basis of what we're planning to do with Calvary Conversations. And so, Mike, I'd like to start with you. You're the senior statesman here. You've been at Calvary longer than the rest of us, so you get the honor of kind of getting us started here. But I'd like to know, what scripture comes to your mind when you think about this idea of maybe being the sons of Issachar and and understanding the times and really knowing what God's people should be doing, as well as just the importance biblically, scripturally, of really engaging each other in the critical conversations of our time. That was a long question, but no. see what you can do with that.
When you ask that, this last year has compelled us all to be in some unique conversations. I mean, ministry, no matter where you're involved, you're always asking other people, what do I do now? And I just know, though I'm not in a local church now, but I'm here at a school, and we're asking the same question, what do we do now? And that's where when you're thinking of conversations and people wanting to have conversations. That's the nature of ministry. And one side is you don't know it all, so you've got to. And we're not coming at anybody with we know it all. That's not what we're doing with the conversations. Rather, we want to bring other people into the room to help us to talk. So you ask that, and just the people that we have here, we talk with a lot of one another as well as others. But you asked a question about Scripture there, Sean, and one that comes to mind is I think Acts 7, where Stephen says that David fulfilled his purpose. And I just know that myself and others that I've talked through the years in ministry, we want to do what God calls us to do where we're at and to accomplish that purpose. And quite often we just really don't have a good idea what that is. So we want to hear people that are struggling with that same question. And we're all unique people, and we minister at unique places in a unique time. And as much as we can we find what God's wanting us to do where we're at that time? So we can say with Stephen about David, and people will say it about us, he fulfilled his purpose as much as we can know it. You think of people through history, and they really seem to touch in on where God had them and a purpose that they had. Now, I'm thinking of some secular leaders who, boy, they were the right person at the right time, like Churchill during World War II. We're not going to be on the same level, more than likely, but there's still, because we serve a great God who has sovereign plans and purposes. So you ask what Scripture, and that's one of them that impels me, Lord, I want to find that purpose. And so I need to bring people into my life to hear what they're saying and talking about and how they're processing it. And through that, then I discern God's will.
Excellent. That's a great verse for that idea. Tim, Josh, would you have anything to add?
That was great. Only one thing that kind of sticks in my mind as we're launching out on this new venture is that there's a lot of information out there today. We're overwhelmed by information and even misinformation at times, and oftentimes for Christians, maybe it can be our tendency to get up and remove ourselves from the conversation, but that doesn't benefit anybody if we leave the table. And so I like to use the analogy of taking a seat at the table of ideas and coming back to here's the biblical worldview related to these subjects that we're going to be talking about.
Good, yeah. Well, Mike, like I said, you've been at Calvary longer than the rest of us. So let me just have you respond to this idea, and that is that we've talked about this, and we agree that there are some really good, intelligent, thoughtful people here at Calvary, faculty and staff, and then in the broader Calvary community, who we just believe can make a significant contribution to many of the conversations of our time. Like Josh was just saying, there's a lot of conversation happening, but we really believe that the people of Calvary can contribute to the conversations of our time in a really thoughtful way.
We've changed. Now, I haven't seen some of the changes that occurred before me. I came when a program needed to be changed there, a combination of the ministry studies program at the college and the seminary. So there was a change that went on when I came. But since then, there have been other changes that we've adapted to. The students that are coming, their desire for how to serve the Lord has changed. So Sean, if I'm addressing what you're talking about, Calvary is trying to address the different opportunities that we have. And so we have people on faculty, and we have emphases in the school that we're trying to meet the need where God's people are serving out in the culture. I'm thinking of the STEM program. That's one of the recent ones that we have with Chris Basil, a chemist who's here on faculty, and just his desire to ground students in in God's word and thinking as they approach a part of the world where if they were to go on a secular organization, they'd be confronted with theistic evolution at the best, evolution probably, for the most part. So he's committed, the other disciplines that we have here at the school, there are people that have been practitioners out in the field, all of us. And so we want to speak out of that experience, but we're here. And so we're sort of out of touch with the world. So I've seen through the years that we still have to stay fresh. And that's part of our reading, part of our spouses. My wife keeps saying, "You don't know what's going on in the church." So I go, "No, I need to find that out." And so we are trying to relate to what's going on in the world as best we can. And through that, then pass on to other people what we've heard and learned. And, so there's a depth here that we have to offer, I think.
Good. I like that you use the word opportunity, because I think that sometimes, when things are so uncertain and even volatile in our culture, that I think it's easy for people to be fearful. And I think Josh referred to this, to kind of pull back. But really, what we need to do is say, where are the opportunities? Because change and uncertainty always bring opportunities. And so that's I was glad you used that word. And so one of the things that we want to do in Calvary Conversations is to introduce you to more of those faculty and staff here at Calvary who are working to make Calvary special, but also that those that we believe are in some way designed or equipped to help us understand our times and speak to it. So we just look forward to introducing you to more of the faculty and staff here at Calvary, and just encourage you to connect with us in various ways.
Maybe I could put a footnote in too.
Okay.
You're going to hear it from Josh and Tim. Josh in missions, Tim's been in missions, but they're both representing unique ways that we're doing that now. So while we've stayed very true to the foundational things that Calvary was begun on, we are adding to that and all the different programs that we have available for people to do ministry in different ways because of the opportunities.
Good. Yeah. And in fact, one of our first interviews is I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Granados, our president, and I want to engage with him on the issue of university versus Bible college, and what the differences are and why those are significant for us as Calvary University now. So Tim and Josh, let me ask this of both of you, and Mike, jump in here as you feel led. But what are some of the most important conversations happening in our world, in our times, as it relates to the church and to ministry and to family, to higher education, to culture? What are some of the important conversations from your perspective?
Josh, you want to go?
Oh, well, I mean, as I've been thinking about that, obviously, some passions of mine, missions and mobilizing more Christians to be engaged in that kind of cross-cultural ministry. But as we still deal with the aftermath in COVID and what the repercussions are going to be for that, probably one primary question is what's the local church going to look like? What's the future and the nature of the local church as we, services have moved online, and even now as cases are dropping, what's it going to look like as we move out of that? There's whole branches out there, the missional church movement, and just different ideas of what the church should look like. So that's an important conversation. Now, obviously, we're having there's still racial issues going on in our country, and a lot of ethnic issues, immigration, those kind of conversations are happening. And so one of my first interviews will be with an alumni who's into that kind of ministry. Adrian Robertson, one of our alumni and also a board member, who's a pastor in Kansas City, Kansas. And but how do we engage in those kind of conversations related to racial and ethnic tensions? You know, how do we bring a biblical worldview into those kind of things? So, Tim?
And for me, it's a very similar passion. Josh and I are really cut from the same cloth. Where our friendship goes back long before my employment at Calvary. And one thing I think that we both share is a passion for cross-cultural engagement. And sometimes it does take the form of what we traditionally refer to as missions. But what I believe, and I think it's an incredibly important conversation we need to be having right now, I do not believe it is possible to function in American culture today as a Christian without some degree of cross-cultural savvy. Because
once more for the people in the back.
Yeah, I do not believe it is possible to engage as a Christian in American culture without some degree of cross-cultural savvy. We need to, and cross-cultural intelligence, really. And what is cross-cultural intelligence? It is the ability to put yourself at least in the position of, or understand the mindset of people who have been culturalized very differently from you. And those gaps have been widening and widening as, I would say, the common American experience has widened and fractured, right? When I talk about cross-cultural engagement, yes, I'm talking about engagement with immigrant populations. That's only one aspect of it, though. It is engagement with people who have grown up in a completely secular mindset. And I'm not saying that sort of in a pejorative way. I mean, just not having any exposure at all to any theistic concepts in their upbringing. If you engage a person like that in conversation, you cannot begin in the same place that a lot of our evangelism materials that are 50 or 60 years old have us engaging, at least at the point to where they assume the existence of God. No, that assumption isn't even there anymore. We have to be a lot more savvy about apologetics. We have to be a lot more savvy to their mindset. And if you ask me, Sean, you brought up what scripture comes to mind. I'll tell you that one of the most important scriptures I think we have to grapple with right now is 1 Peter 3:15. But in your hearts, revere Christ as Lord. So keeping Christ as first place, and yet always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you for the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. And I think, unfortunately, in the church right now, gentleness and respect are not as thoughtful engagement paired with gentleness and respect is not as much the norm as I'd like to see it. And that's a real passion of mine, to see us engaging with the world, engaging in a pluralistic society, because the cat's out of the bag, folks. We're in a post-Christian society now. So our idea of the God of the Bible is only one of many that compete for attention in the wider world, right? So we have to figure out in this pluralistic society how to engage people thoughtfully and with gentleness and with respect while still revering Christ as Lord. So yeah, that's what I would call, that's what I deem to be the most important issues. One of the most important issues of our time.
Can I add one thing real quick, Sean?
Sure.
But just in piggybacking off what Tim said, but even, a lot of the issues that we're facing in our country today, even, you think about some of the political issues and disagreements and, right, left, Republican, Democrat, whatever, but it all fundamentally comes down to the fact that we don't look at the world the same way. We have a different understanding of reality. And so until we get to those core issues, even is what Tim was talking about, and how we actually view the nature of reality, much of our response to some of the things around us is misguided and misplaced, because it's like we're trying to, one of the analogies I use with my students, it's like we're trying to treat a bullet hole with a Band-Aid, because we're we're focusing on the external things when really you've got to deal with the core issues first.
That's good. That's good. And I'm really glad. I think it was Tim that brought up culture. And we recognize that we could spend a lot of time talking about this. And in fact, when we were preparing for the Christian Leaders Conference, we had decided to address some of those issues of culture that Tim brought up a little bit ago. And so I just kind of want to put a plug in for our first several conversations are going to be related to culture. In fact, probably if you get right down to it, probably all of them are related to culture ultimately. But we're going to specifically be addressing the issue of culture. And I was really glad, Tim, also that you brought up the reality that we're not just talking about, the immigrants among us or the refugees among us, which is absolutely an important issue, and we're planning to explore that as well. But really, the people who look like us and the people who were born here, the people who live next door to us, have very different cultures very often, and that's a really important conversation that we need to be having. And so I'm glad you brought those up. Let me throw this in here. I've talked to people recently who are kind of at that point where they want to not engage in these conversations, and I've for some reason I've heard a lot of people saying that they're getting off social media, at least for a while. What would you say to those folks as far as how do we navigate these really difficult and supercharged, sometimes very emotional conversations, and yet maintain our sanity and our our mental health? How do we do that? Or is it possible?
Oh, it's very possible. The first two things that come to my mind are with grace and humility. Grace to the person that you are talking with, and recognizing. So if we approach this from a cultural perspective and understanding that they just don't view the world the same way we do, grace for the reality that their conclusions are coming from a picture of reality that is different from ours. And then humility. All right. So grace to the other person, and then humility on our own part to realize that there may be ways in which we are misunderstanding something. I mean, maybe my first reaction to an issue or what somebody has said is absent from a real root understanding of how they arrive at that conclusion. How they came to that. And so maybe if I can understand that from their perspective, it'll make a little bit more sense. Not that I'll necessarily agree, but it will make more sense as to how they got to that conclusion. So grace and humility. And again, maybe real quick, come back to the analogy of taking a seat at the table. I have left social media for periods of time. I've taken a month off here or there because it was getting too much for me, and so I can understand that. But again, if you leave the table, if you leave the conversation and the ideas, then yes, you may be restricting their ability to influence you, somebody's ability to have an impact on you. But you're also removing your ability to influence them. And once you do that, you can't hope for there to be any kind of change or furthering the conversation.
That's good. Anybody else have something to add to that?
I do, and we're definitely going to test a little bit of the boundaries of our perhaps even our own differences in this group. But I think that's good. I think it's important that we have conversations. But I would say that one of the main concerns I have about the purported difficult conversations between the church and the world right now is that they are all centered around the politics of this country and not around more important things. Yes, I agree that politics sometimes touches on moral issues and it is worth having conversations about. But I would also agree that the majority of conversations that I see Christians engaging with the world are characteristic of this attitude. And I'll share this. This is a true story. I will not share where this occurred. I was at a church Bible study, not my home church, and I heard a man say, and this was several years ago. So I heard a man say to the group, "Well, I had a chance to witness to my coworkers this week and tell one of my coworkers this week and tell him the truth about what Obama and the Democrats are doing to this country."
Hmm.
Did you catch this?
Yeah.
That witnessing was equated
witnessing.
with politics. And this is one of the key issues I see. Christians have got to disconnect politics from the gospel. And I would like to say a very convicting verse, that where your treasure is, there your heart is also. And maybe another related verse, that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And what we're seeing in a lot of believers, that's very disappointing to me right now, is that their treasure appears to be who gets in office and what political party currently has the power, and not the gospel of Jesus Christ, and not the power of the gospel to transform individual lives. And I think because we have lost that focus, we are reaping a whirlwind of issues in the church community right now. So yeah, I realize I'm testing that a little bit, but
No, I think that's good, because I think that's one of the opportunities, Tim, is to clarify those things. The politics and the moral issues that we're facing as a country. Those are what I would kind of refer to as mid-level issues that are very important to us in our time. And we should be talking about those, and we should be working through those. But we also need to discern the difference between those things and the grand scheme of things, the meta narrative, as they say, of what God is doing in this world. And I so we do need to talk about those things and really be discerning about the difference between what's ultimately important and what's temporarily important.
Yeah. If I could add a comment.
Yeah.
Tim, you're talking about maybe we would disagree with you. We're in a culture where the old saying, God made us with 2 ears and 1 mouth. We don't want to use the ears, meaning, why would I want to listen to him? I disagree with him. He's wrong. And that's not the attitude we should have. We should be able to listen in order to clarify, yes, but to listen, and that personal dimension of affirming. Someone can have an opinion and they need to form an opinion, but do we allow them to listen, or do we listen to them and allow them to have their opinion? Sometimes we don't listen enough, is what I'm saying. And hopefully through our conversations here, we'll do a lot of listening as well as speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. And in fact, we've agreed that our driving motivation for the conversations that we have here and the guests that we invite to engage in those conversations is to help Christians lead and serve well. And we're actually running up against our self-imposed time limit. So I'm going to wrap things up with that. Our primary intent is not to do evangelism, though I believe that clarification of the gospel and exploring the implications of the gospel is these are lifelong and critical conversations that we should be having as well, and almost certainly will as we move forward. But our driving motivation is to help Christians lead and serve well. And so we want this to be an offering to all those who understand that we live in uncertain times and precarious times, and just want to lead their families well, lead their churches well, lead their ministries well, and engage the people around them out of love and as someone mentioned earlier, Peter said, with gentleness and respect. So thank you, gentlemen. We are out of time, and let me just mention that our format moving forward is that we are planning to keep our conversations no longer than 26 minutes, because that's actually the average length of a commute in the United States. So that's where we are going to try to draw the line. But But thank you so much for adding Calvary Conversations, gentlemen, to your already full schedules, and just I'm looking forward to the months and perhaps years ahead, if the Lord wills. And if you're listening today, we thank you so much for joining us for our first ever Calvary Conversations. And Calvary Conversations is a ministry of Calvary University in Kansas City, Missouri. And you can find more information about Calvary at Calvary, Calvary, not cavalry. I heard somebody say that recently. Calvary, CALVARY.edu on the World Wide Web. And you can also call us at 816-322-0110. And if you would like to interact with us, we would welcome that. And you can find us on social media and on the faculty page of the Calvary University website. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Grace and peace.